Hello, everyone. I want to thank you all for coming to Atidna's joint memorial for peace to mark 1 year of loss in Palestine, Israel, Lebanon, and beyond. If you are in the crowd, I want to start off by giving you the warmest thank you possible for not only taking time out of your day to join us in our mission for peace, brotherhood, and unity, but it also means you chose to be here over ACL, so thank you. And it also means you are not too hungover from yesterday's UT versus OU game. Likewise, if you are Jewish like myself, it is not easy to have a lot of energy coming out of your Yom Kippur fast, so thank you for being here with us today. My name is Elijah Kallenberg. I am the president and founder of Atidna International, and I am the MC for Atidna's Joint Memorial for Peace. Before going any further, I want to share a little about the purpose of today's memorial alongside some personal sentiments of mine. I know many people in the crowd have heard me speak for hours on end about all these subjects and then some, and I know many people cannot wait to hear from our two amazing keynote speakers, Maoz Inon and Aziz Abu Sarah, so I will try to keep my words as brief as possible. I founded Atidna in 2022 of my freshman year at UT, which was nearly a year and a half before October 7th. And I did so because I recognized the deep, deep divisions defining Jewish and Arab students on our campus. There existed few to no spaces for our two peoples to civilly engage with the quote-unquote other. Even in Middle East studies classes, where Jewish and Arab students were both prominently represented, these spaces were all too often marred by self-segregation and tribalization. As a Jewish individual who was personally transformed by the civil interactions and conversations I had with my Palestinian peers and friends during my youth, conversations that allowed me to see the familial bond uniting Jews and Palestinians, I knew the path to humanization and creating empathy lies in simply allowing our two peoples to meet, to talk, and to begin to understand the quote-unquote other. By having these grassroots conversations, we learn we are not all that different. Rather than being others, we can begin to see ourselves as brothers that should be uniting and not fighting. All that is required to come to these conclusions is simply the courage to meet. Overall, Atidna is just a manifestation of that realization. For nearly 3 years now at UT and on campuses across the country, we have worked to make that dream a reality by creating some of the first and only spaces for dialogue and peace building between Palestinians, Israelis, Jews, and Arabs, and others on college campuses. Today's Joint Memorial for Peace is arguably the culmination of our efforts by creating a rare but needed space for breaking down the overwhelming polarization gripping us. This space is one for Jews and Arabs, Israelis and Palestinians, and individuals from neither of those aforementioned backgrounds, but who nonetheless are allies in our mission for togetherness, to not only mourn with each other, but for the quote-unquote other. This is a space where our common humanity trumps all else amid a year of overwhelming sadness, death, and destruction. We are here today, first and foremost, to mourn for innocents lost irrespective of their background, and to be a light which stands up and says, no more. No more to the normalization of bloodlust and death devouring so many innocents across the Middle East. Truly, now more than ever, from Palestine to Israel to Lebanon to Iran, from Jews to Arabs to Persians, the entire region is deserving of a ceasefire and a hostage deal for the sake of preventing further unspeakable destruction from ensuing. When writing my speech, I was initially lost for words about what exactly I should say to usher in this event. At first, I thought I would dedicate my few minutes with you to sharing the words and aspirations for equality, peace, and unity from the innocents we have lost thus far, possibly by reciting the words of Hammam Lo, a Palestinian doctor who was killed following his refusal to abandon his patients, or by recounting the many tales of Israeli peace activist Vivian Silver, who has devoted her life to unifying our two peoples and to aiding Palestinians harmed by occupational injustices. Nonetheless, I understood no matter what I would say, my words could never do their souls the justice they deserve. At the end of the day, I decided the best tale to share from this past year was my own. Honestly, I'm not that special. I'm just a Jewish kid from San Antonio. But I believe my thoughts and sentiments during and after October 7th hit at the core of the dread that is manifesting within so many of us here today. Before I go any further, I must clarify that while I am sharing my story from the past year, I will be the first one to emphasize that the carnage overtaking the Holy Land did not begin on October 7th. This year has undoubtedly been the most painful and bloody chapter in the history of Israel and Palestine. However, it is sadly just that, a single chapter of grief and destruction embedded within an over 75-year-old story which has been written in far too much innocent blood. As a student of history, as an avid observer of contemporary affairs, and as a Jewish individual who has lived with Palestinians in the occupied West Bank, it would be disingenuous for me or anyone in my position to merely start this story on October 7th without any further explanation, testifying to the sorrowful yet deep and decades-rooted injustices that have brought us to this point. In 2023 alone, for example, before the brutal and heinous murder of 1,200 Israelis, that 10-month period alone, before October 7th, was the most deadly for Palestinians in the West Bank to date due to the abhorrent settler and occupational violence they are subjected to. I share this not to justify notions of revenge and hate, but to merely show the pain and grief defining the land has never ceased during, before, or after October 7th. My story, especially my experiences in the past year, pale in comparison to the pain of my brothers, sisters, and cousins in the land, especially the innocent Palestinians and Israelis killed due to the hatred, inhumanity, and ignorance of a select few. I had the luxury of being an ocean away and learning about October 7th via the internet. My initial thoughts, like many of you, were of pure horror and dread. On one hand, the news of many innocent Israelis killed was earth-shattering. At first, I did not believe it. Rather, I did not want to believe it, but I slowly began to understand the atrocities that had been done on that day. On the other hand, I also knew the dark, dark fate that awaited Gaza. With Netanyahu and fascistic figures like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich at the helm, I immediately knew this Israeli government's bloodlust for revenge would not be tempered without unspeakable death and carnage, a reality that sadly did arise and continues to scar humanity. As many peaceniks have so eloquently stated before me, just as nothing can justify the innocent Israelis and hostages taken on October 7th, nothing too can justify the tens of thousands of innocent Palestinians and now Lebanese civilians taken in its aftermath. From the river to the sea, there exists only one family, and that family deserves to be unified and free. Free from bloodshed, free from captivity, free from occupation, and free from the hate and segregation that has generated so much inequality and injustice in our shared homeland. In the days immediately following October 7th, my agony only grew. As a socially active member of the Jewish community, I was in horror as some of my fellow Jews were openly expressing their desires for revenge and devolving to dehumanizing rhetoric about the Palestinian people in response to the many evils just inflicted upon the Israeli people. Amid my pleas that revenge is an empty path which only sows the seeds of further hatred and destruction, it seemed at times as if I was speaking into an empty void. While bedridden with depression for days, and despite my insignificance as only a single human being, I decided to combat these iniquities the only way I knew how, through love, brotherhood, and unity. As polarization, animosity, and tribalization grew to be their strongest following October 7th on campus, I knew the work of Atidna in bringing together Israeli, Palestinian, Jewish, Arab, and other students together for dialogue and peace building was more important now than ever. Only 3 weeks after October 7th, we at Atidna organized a joint dialogue for Jewish, Arab, Israeli, and Palestinian students to discuss the situation on the ground in southern Israel and Gaza together, to find common ground, mutual understanding, and solidarity amid this otherwise dark moment. Then, exactly 1 month after October 7th, on November 7th, we at Atidna hosted a joint vigil to honor all innocents taken in that month on these very steps. Slowly but surely, the same formula we have always used, breaking down hatred by creating joint spaces for civil interactions between our two communities, began to prevail in shining a light amid the darkness we were all experiencing. By allowing our two peoples to meet, we reminded everyone here at UT that before anything else, we are brothers, not others, and we are one family, not inherent enemies. Our mission persists until today with this very memorial. Whether you know it or not, each and every one of you is depriving hate of its most vital catalyst, division. We are living proof that peace and unity can be achieved. For that I say, thank you. Thank you all for proving to me and the world that bloodshed and tribalization are not the only outcomes of grief. Rather, our common humanity in this dark moment can shine a path for hope to build a future of equality, unity, and love. Before I hand the mic off to Atidna's Vice President and my Palestinian counterpart, Jad Hashem, I want to leave the crowd with two important notes. Firstly, as a Jewish individual, I want to especially thank everyone from an Arab background in the crowd. While this notion is usually unspoken in events like this, it is not easy to be in a space for joint mourning when you know that not only has your quote-unquote side endured a far greater number of casualties, but it's even harder when you are still currently experiencing immense threats to livelihood and security in both Gaza and Lebanon. I think I speak for many, especially many Jewish individuals, when I say your empathy in still being able to mourn for the quote-unquote other in spite of these dark times is not lost on us. My last announcement is that this is my final public Atidna peace event as president of Atidna's chapter at UT Austin. I'm officially stepping down at the end of the semester. Don't be too sad, I'm still going to be the president of the overarching nonprofit, Atidna International. However, here at our UT chapter, any healthy organization must have a clear chain of succession for it to thrive. Hence, this is my time to say farewell. It has been an amazing 3 years because of the hope and memories each and every one of you has instilled within me. For that, I am eternally grateful. Thank you. May God bless you all. And inshallah, Bezat Hashem, God willing, we will see peace, freedom, and equality as soon as possible from the river to the sea. All right. Thank you. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the next president of Atidna at UT and the first Palestinian president of an Atidna chapter in the United States, Jad Hashem.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. First of all, I want to thank Elijah for not only delivering the opening remarks for this gathering, but for also being the leading organizer of Atidna as a whole. He's been an outstanding president, the best president that we could ever hope for at Atidna. I'm forever grateful for all of the work that he has put in to continue this great project that we cherish so much. Of course, I also want to thank each and every one of you for joining us on this day. And I have to give a huge thank you to our guests, Maoz Inon and Aziz Abu Sarah, who flew in for this event to deliver their powerful testimonies. Ladies and gentlemen, for those who don't know me, my name is Jad Hashem. I'm the Vice President of Atidna International. I'm also a junior here at the University of Texas, but most importantly, I'm Palestinian American. To be quite blunt, the last year has been the most difficult year of my life, and I know that so many of you echo that sentiment. Every day I wake up and I check the news, only to see articles, pictures, and videos of innocent people being slaughtered on a day-to-day basis, all in the name of war. And every day, we all wonder when all of this will ever end. When will we see the humanity in one another? When will we grasp the idea that we are all one family, cousins, not enemies? When will we say enough is enough? When will we say that the bloodshed and the horrors must stop? And when will we ever learn to value one another's lives as much as we value our own? As I speak to you today, over 42,000 Palestinians, including over 17,000 children, have been murdered, in addition to over 1,700 Israelis who have been killed. In Lebanon, over 2,000 civilians have been slaughtered, and in Syria, nearly 400 people have lost their lives. And perhaps the scariest thing of this all is that these very well may be conservative estimates, with some figures showing the death toll amongst Palestinian civilians to be as high as 200,000. From a Palestinian perspective, we are not new to this. I would be remiss if I pretended that history only began on October the 7th, as the Palestinian people have long suffered from dehumanization, mass murder, and imprisonment. My people have been left without a proper home for over 76 years now, dating back to the Nakba. And we know what it's like to live under occupation and brutal oppression. And yet, even through our pain, we pray for peace. So with so much death, destruction, and despair, what are we to do? How do we get through the most difficult of times? My answer is with hope. It is with hope that we carry ourselves forward to become a generation of peace, humanity, and empathy. We are to be the generation of mutual understanding and loving one another in order to bring about prosperity for our peoples. I want to take the time to also dedicate this speech to two specific victims. Gafir Bibas, an Israeli baby who was kidnapped and taken hostage by Hamas fighters on October 7th. To this day, it remains unknown if he is alive. I also want to dedicate my speech to Hind Rajab, a Palestinian child who was intentionally shot over 300 times and was killed in Gaza by Israeli soldiers. Her last words were captured on recording as she pleaded with dispatchers to save her life. No child from any background should ever have to think about their final words and whether or not they will survive unspeakable tragedies. And yet, even with these two children who have endured some of the greatest pain that we could ever know, people around the world are too focused on what their nationality, religion, or ethnic background is. I ask you, when will we see each other not as Israeli or Palestinian, but as human beings? As a Muslim, I am taught by my faith that all lives are precious and that God created us equal in his image. I challenge everyone to echo that sentiment and to choose love over revenge and peace over terror. Ladies and gentlemen, as I speak to you today, tens of thousands of Palestinians are in critical condition and may be on their final hours, with thousands more pleading for the bombardment of their homes to end. In addition, just under 100 Israeli hostages are still being held in captivity, with their families wondering if they will ever see their loved ones again. Now, we see things perhaps taking a turn for the worse, as it appears that a regional war could break out any moment now. While I made a promise to myself to avoid too much political talk in this speech, there is no way that I could give this speech without repeating the urgent need for an immediate and lasting ceasefire with a hostage release deal that would permanently end hostility between our two peoples and see loved ones returned to their homes, and with the delivery of humanitarian aid that our people so desperately need. Again, I say, ceasefire now, bring them home, and release all hostages. For so many of us, it's easy to look for revenge. If someone killed your child or murdered your mother, it would seem like the only rational thought in your head is to seek revenge. Yet I challenge you to think about a quote delivered from former President of the United States, Jimmy Carter, who recently celebrated his 100th birthday. President Carter once said, "We will not learn how to live together in peace by killing each other's children." This quote, I believe, is more relevant than ever before. By killing each other in the name of vengeance or in seeking greater political goals, we are only fanning the flames even more. The only way to end this bloodshed is with mutual understanding of the other and to tear down oppression through diplomacy and discussion, not through arms. The more violence that we see, the angrier our societies will be. Palestinians and Israelis are so much more similar than the media would have us believe, and yet we look to turn one another into dust without thinking about the consequences. I challenge you all to choose love and humanity, to choose respect and mutual understanding. The only way out of this is with love, not war. The only thing that violence will do is drive us further and further apart, and we simply cannot afford to isolate ourselves more than we already have. With that, I pray that our peoples will choose to come together for a better future for all, and I pray for this destruction and despair to end. Thank you all, God bless you, and may God protect all innocents from the river to the sea.
All right. For our next speaker, he is a journalist who has written extensively about the Middle East. He is a native of New York. He moved to Lebanon as a freelance journalist correspondent in the summer of 2003. For the next 8 years, his home base was in Beirut. He covered the region from Iran to Libya, from the war in Iraq to the Arab Spring, eventually becoming the Middle East bureau chief for Time magazine. Today, his story will be used as a fabric for peace in the region. It is my pleasure to introduce Professor Andrew Butters.
Thank you, Elijah. Thank you, Jad. Thank you all. I'm honored to be here and share in just a few words, because I know we're all waiting to hear eager to hear our keynote speakers. Just to introduce myself a little more, as an American journalist who spent 10 years in the Middle East, I had the incredible privilege of being able to see so many different sides of these conflicts. One of the things that we do as journalists is sit with the suffering of ordinary people. So that meant sitting in the homes of families who've had their roofs blown off by Hamas rockets in Sderot in southern Israel. It meant visiting Metula in the north of Israel on the border of Lebanon, visiting villages along the border, Marun al-Ras, Nabatea. So my thoughts are with all those groups and all those people at this time. And my thoughts are especially with my friends and colleagues who are still covering this conflict. This war has killed over 128 journalists and media workers, some of them with their families, and it's a disproportionate death toll. One Israeli videographer for AP was killed on October 7th, and since then there's been a widespread targeting of journalists in Gaza and Lebanon by Israeli soldiers, and that just has to end. So in my travels in the Middle East, of course, what I found is similarities in all these different countries and places, and so what I'm thrilled about being part of this event and being part of Atidna is the sense of trying to mend the rift that October 7th in particular brought in among these groups and how these groups are represented here in the U.S. And so I think often about that mantra that came out of the Israeli families who were advocating for the release of their family members who are held hostage in Gaza, all for all. The notion that the hostages should be released from Gaza in exchange for Palestinian prisoners in Israel. But to think on a broader scale than that all for all means that our safety is inextricably entwined with each other's. And I say that because, of course, we're at this very dangerous moment right now where we're seeing the culmination of very different visions, which are also strikingly similar. The vision of Yahya Sinwar and Hamas, and the vision of Benjamin Netanyahu and his far-right coalition.
this idea that somehow through bloodshed and other people's suffering, that there can be a new transformed Middle East. And what's particularly dangerous about this moment is while for the past year, our own government has made noises about wanting restraint and a ceasefire while doing very little to use the enormous leverage that we have as Americans over this conflict and over the Israeli government. There now seems to be enough momentum on the Israeli side after these spectacular attacks against Hamas, the pager attacks, the assassination of Hassan Nasrallah, and a kind of eagerness from the White House to let Israel have the green light to do what it wants in Lebanon, and maybe, just maybe, they'll deal a mortal blow to Hezbollah, and maybe, just maybe, the Islamic Republic in Iran will also be have its teeth kicked in, so to speak. And maybe that'll happen. And maybe that's true. But at this point in the history of this conflict, we've been there, we've seen this, we've seen what attempts to change the Middle East by force have wrought. In Lebanon alone, Israel in 1982 tried this before, invading Lebanon to change the face of the Middle East and install a favorable government that would rid Lebanon of the PLO, and which only ended up creating Hezbollah. We saw this in Iraq in 2003 with the American invasion and all the carnage that wrought. And I was in Lebanon last time in 2006, and when Israel tried this before, and I can't believe that the country and the city that I called home for 10 years is going through this again. But the consequences for giving this another shot, for trying to redraw the Middle East by force once again, could be much more profound this time, and could be much more profound in ways that are going to find us here in America. There is every reason to believe that that if Israel does in fact deal some kind of wildly damaging blow to Hezbollah, that the end result will not be some peace and democracy and a million flowers blooming in Lebanon, but more violence, more civil war, more refugees. The idea that Iran, that the Islamic Republic, is going to collapse, and again another modern nation, democratic state, is going to emerge from that rubble. It's much more likely that we're going to see a Syria-like scenario in Iran with a rump regime, maybe even run directly by the Revolutionary Guards, and a country of 40 million people turned into refugees, facing all kinds of chaos and violence. And while there may be a kind of maximalist sort of victory for the right-wing government of Israel, a permanent occupation of the West Bank, a resettlement of Gaza, a buffer zone in Israel, instead of a kind of ring of fire protecting Israel or an iron dome, I think we're going to see massive fields of rubble and chaos and despair on the outside of those zones, and so I think the burden is on all of us here. I know so many of us feel so stuck in this moment. I think that so many Israelis feel caught between Hezbollah and Hamas on one side and their far right-wing government on the other side. I think the most stuck of all are of course, the people of Gaza, who've been besieged for the last 15 years and are now being systematically destroyed. And the people of Lebanon dragged to war by Hezbollah and facing what could be the last time. I mean, we have this idea that Beirut is the phoenix that always rises, but what if this is the last time for that beautiful city? And here in America, so many of us feel caught between the rising tide of authoritarianism on the one hand and a coalition of civil rights and democracy that's just too afraid to even talk about Palestine. And so in moments like this and of feeling stuck, I often think about the people of Iran. My wife is Iranian. She's a professor here at UT as well. And I think about how stuck the people of Iran have been under a regime that abuses them and the world powers that are sanctioning their country and pressuring them into despair. And yet every time their regime has a kind of election, a kind of the very limited elections that they have in Iran where the candidates are chosen beforehand. Consistently, the people of Iran come out and assert their basic humanity, their basic dignity, and their basic rights, and find the least awful person to vote for. And they find ways in their own lives, on social media, in the spaces they have for movements to assert their own human dignity. And so it's incumbent on us, at the very least, to hope that a way emerges out of no way. But because we, as Americans, are the least stuck of all of them, right? We're removed, at least for now, from these cycles of violence. That we have to call and do what we can to use the language that we need to stop this war, and to not be afraid to say that mass murder and the rule of law applies to everyone. Thank you.
Before we get to our two keynote speakers and final speakers for the night, I would be honored if everyone could join me in a moment of silence to honor those we have lost thus far. Thank you. Finally, for our keynote speakers, they are two individuals who have endured immense pain and loss, yet still utilize their story for unity rather than hate. They are two individuals who have a clear but unfathomably important message that peace is possible. It is my utmost honor to welcome to UT Maoz Inon and Aziz Abu Sarah. Love you, love you, love you. Love you, Aziz.
Before we start, and it's not going to be long, max 30 minutes. You can all come closer here.
No. I planned for 2 hours, so I don't know what is.
No.
Go for as long as you guys
We are not on the same side. 2 hours here, 30 minutes.
2 hours and 30 minutes.
Okay, yes. So you can come closer. You can sit on the stairs here. It's there is shade. No, we are sharing. We are sharing the vision, and we are sharing the mic. And coming here, it was 5 minutes walk from the great hotel we are staying, and I was thinking how to open. And in the last 24 hours, there are dozens of more casualties in Lebanon, in Gaza. And just after losing my parents in October 7th, I was crying. And I shared it with the world that I'm not just crying for my parents, I'm also crying for all the innocent that will die in the war. Palestinians and Israelis, and now Lebanese and Syrian. And unfortunately, my tears didn't stop the war. they didn't, because we see that the situation is just escalating. But sometimes tears is the only thing we have. But what we are coming to offer you, and the vision and the action we are coming to bring here to Austin, Texas, is tears, but much more. We are going to offer action in our 30 minutes of talk.
And as Maoz, hello everyone. And as Maoz said, these last 24 hours has been difficult, like the whole last year. What he didn't mention is nearby his hometown in Binyamina, there was a drone attack from Hezbollah and 60 people have been injured. I know Maoz, I know his family, I know his kids, I know his wife, and I know how terrifying and scary to know your family in a situation like this and in such a terrifying moment. So it's not over, and our families are still living through the horror of this war. But also I wanted to say, like Maoz started, mourning is important, crying is important, but if all we do is mourn and cry, nothing changes. We are not here to ask you for your prayers. We're not here to ask you for your tears. We're not here to ask you, as Maoz often says, to cross your fingers, as President Biden said and wished us for peace. But we're here to ask you to act. Because without actions, we will continue to read the same kind of news. And we are here to also model what the alternative and what the future can look like. And I think we saw it today, not just with Maoz and I, but also these amazing, amazing leaders. So thank you for being here, and thank you for modeling an incredible example of what Israelis and Palestinians, Arabs and Jews, all these names, how they can model the future.
Thank you. And again, many times after we speak together, people from the audience come and tell us, you need to be cloned. There need to be more of you. And here...
We did it!
We did it, yes, with Jad and Elia. We did it, and we were cloned. So it's amazing to be here and to share the mic and the stage. And thanks you for inviting us. Thank you. So on October 7th, I lost both my parents. But I also won many, many things. I won Aziz, we are brothers now. I won many other brothers and sisters, Palestinians, Israelis, Iranian sisters, Muslims, Christian, Jews, Baha'i, and others. And I won this moment with you here. For me, it's a victory. That you care, you are not going to the ACL, you are standing here in the shade, but standing. So, and caring is the first motion or feeling in order to create a change. So thank you for caring, and thank you for creating this moment. For us, it means the world. So thank you, everyone.
In one of our first conversations after Maoz's parents were killed, I reached out to him the next day and I said, my condolences, I'm so sorry, I feel the pain. But then we talked, and I told him, I can't believe few days after your parents were killed, you were speaking about people's pain in Gaza. You were having empathy for the quote-unquote the other. And he responded with, if you are in a desert when it's so hot, just like Texas desert, we've experienced the heat in Texas, and you're out of water and you see one person, what is the first thing you're going to call for? Anybody? Water. Come on, louder. Water. And if we are in the Texas desert, metaphorically, in this war, what is the first thing we are going to ask for and cry for? Peace. Come on, together. What are the main thing we're going to cry for? Peace. Exactly. So that's what's bringing us here together. In the darkest of moments is when you are crying for peace. It's in the darkest of moments that we can take our pain and transform it and make sure that we are modeling what the future can be, because at this moment, there are very few, definitely not politicians, definitely not quote-unquote leaders. So we have to show that there is a vision.
And talking about the vision in the small battle, not the big one, the small one, I have the formula how to make peace. Okay? So in 30 minutes, we have like only 25 minutes. I will need 2 minutes, if Elia remind me, to share with you the formula how we can make peace in the near future. By 2030, okay, less than 60 from now, 2030, there will be peace between the river to the sea. Okay, mark my word on that. And the clock is ticking, yes. So after losing my parents, I start like rallying, and with so many media and interviews all over the world, we're sharing my story and sharing my vision. And at the beginning, I used to say that nothing can prepare any of you, and definitely not me, for losing both my parents, so many of my childhood friends, their parents, their children that will be killed or kidnapped to Gaza. Nothing can prepare you for that moment. But as I was speaking more and more, and time, like the weeks passed, I realized that I was prepared. Me and my siblings, we were prepared for losing my parents, and we were prepared by our parents. They prepared us to the moment of the death, and I will share it with you in the next few minutes. And it took my brother only 3 days after October 7th to ask the family to share a universal message that we are seeking no revenge. We don't want to revenge the death of our parents, because by revenging, we won't bring them back, and we'll just escalate the violence, the cycle of bloodshed, of hate and fear that is being going on, not October 7th, not 667. It's been going on for a century. And we, our family, in order to continue our parents' legacy, must break this cycle. And that same old night, I had a dream. And in my dream, I can see you, Sausan, and I can see Zinab, and I can see all of you. I could see the entire humanity, and we were all crying. And our bodies were wounded from the war. They were broken, they were torn up, they were burned. And our tears went down from our face down to our bodies. That's how I could see in my dream. And our tears healed our bodies. And we become whole again, and cured, and healthy. And then our tears start going down to the ground. And I looked on the ground, it was all red. It was soaked with blood. So I kept crying, we all kept crying more and more. And our tears start washing the blood from the earth and purifying the land. And then the land become beautiful like the Texan desert in spring. I haven't seen it in spring, but I guess that's how it looked like. Beautiful, shining, and brilliant. And then I could see a path, very clear path, the path to peace and reconciliation. And I've decided, in order to save myself, and I was drawing, for 4 days I was drawing literally in an ocean of sorrow and pain. I was broken into pieces. I've decided that in order to save myself, I must walk this path. And I could not ask, dream, or imagine a better future to walk with me on this path than Aziz. And we've been working on it for a year now, and we are welcoming you. Some of you are already walking with us, and we are inviting those who don't to start walking and act with us.
So my story is not very different than Maoz. I grew up in East Jerusalem. My brother was killed when I was 10 years old by Israeli soldiers. But I wasn't prepared. I was 10 years old. Nothing prepares at 10 years old to lose your brother. I was angry. I was bitter, and all I could think about was revenge. And for the next 8 years, that's what my life was about. I became very active in politics. I was throwing rocks. I was writing pamphlets. By the time I was 16, I was in the leadership of the Palestinian youth movement in Jerusalem. And this became the only thing I cared about. So much so that I refused to learn Hebrew growing up. It was the language of the enemy. To me, learning Hebrew felt like an impossibility, which was really stupid because I needed Hebrew if you live in Jerusalem. There were many other things that added to my pain. Multiple people in my family have been killed, not only my brother, my dad's cousin, my brother's best friend, other cousins. We had to leave our home, got displaced from the West Bank from a village in the West Bank to the heart of Jerusalem. So many things. But at 18, I went to study Hebrew. And that was my first ever time to meet Israelis and Jews for just like normal people. All my interactions before were with soldiers and with settlers. And this is what's terribly missing today, is the ability to meet the other as an equal, the ability to meet the other as a human. We only see what the media projects to us. And it's always the worst of the worst that brings fear and brings more hate. And in that Hebrew class, I realized something. That when I was 10 years old, I believed I had no choice. But now I had a choice. But I realized even something more troubling. That for the last 8 years, I was being a slave to the person who killed my brother. That every action I've done wasn't because I wanted to do it. This person has made me do it. Every decision I've made was a reaction to the person who killed my brother's action. And if you watch the news today, that's exactly what you hear. They made us do it. This concept of they made us do it. We have to hate them because they made us. They hate us, so we have to hate them. And at that moment, realizing that I'm being enslaved, I decided that I want to take the initiative and I want to be free. And forgiveness is very hard, but it's one of the most powerful tools. Empathy is very hard, but it's one of the most powerful things you can have. And the moment I chose to go in that direction, I found partners. And I realized that this division of Maoz and I being on the opposite side is not true. Him and I are not the opposite side. Maoz and I are in the same side fighting for the same thing. And so people like to divide us, Israeli versus Palestinians, Arabs versus Jews, Muslims, so on. And I say, if you must divide us, then you divide us in this way. It's those who believe in justice, those who believe in equality, those who believe in dignity, those who believe in living together, and those who don't yet. And our mission is to convince those who don't yet to join us.
Yeah. Thank you, Aziz. So you already talked about the forgiveness. It's one of the most important lessons I learned. But before starting telling you about the lessons I learned after October 7th, I want to share with you about my father. My father was a farmer. He was the best farmer in Israel. And it's not because I'm his son, because he was. And for 60 years, he was sowing wheat in the fields. And usually after a very devastating year because of floods or drought or insects, I would come to him in October when he was making the fields ready for sowing. I would ask him, Dad, the last year was so devastating. Why do you keep doing it? Why the bother? You are naive. You believe that next year what do you expect next year to be? And he told me, Maoz, next year will be better. Next year will be better. And I have the agency to make it better. I will learn from my mistakes. I will consult with other farmers and experts. I will get the best seeds. I will fertile the land. I will do everything within my power to make the next year better. And basically, he wrote it on my body, in my cells, in my DNA, that next year will be better. But it's up to me. It's up to you. It's up to us to make next year better. And if we want to harvest peace, and this is what we want to do, we are not here to waste anyone's time. We want to harvest peace soon. There are 3 seeds we must sow: the seeds of hope, the seeds of the future, and the seeds of forgiveness. And let's start with hope. And this is what we are doing now. Because hope is an action. It's not something you lose, not something you can find or someone else will give you. It's an action. And it's very simple to explain how we are making hope. We are making hope by envisioning a better future and by acting to make this future into a reality. As simple as that. But we must be very honest with ourselves to check that our actions are effective. If they are not effective, it's not a reason to give up. It's just a reason to change our action. And this is exactly how we are making hope. And this is exactly what Elijah and Jad and everyone here are doing. So So it's just, again, it's a great honor and privilege. And I would come again and again, all the way from wherever I be, to make hope with you. So thank you.
Okay, the seed of hope.
Hope, now you can tell the future of forgiveness. Talk about the
Okay,
future.
we
No,
talked
tell
about
it.
forgiveness.
Yeah.
You'll talk about it later. I can talk about the future.
Future.
Well, the future, our past sometimes was good together, sometimes was not. We have gone back and forth. I just came from Andalusia with a group of Muslim and Jewish travelers where we learned about times when Muslims and Jews lived in harmony and in peace together. But at times as well, especially in the last 100 years, our story has become farther and farther and farther. But the beautiful thing is, even as our story gets farther now than ever, and today our narratives as far as possible, the future can be better. In the future we can meet and our stories can come back to the same direction because we know from the past, we know from so many stories, we know from so many agreements that happen that the future can and will be better. And that's in our hand. We make the future. We don't wait for anybody else to do it. We do it ourselves. Maoz and I traveling all over to do it. I'll give you one small example, even in that trip in Spain. We were supposed to go, we went to a mosque, we spent time with the Muslim community, went with the Jewish community, spent time there, and we saw them welcoming us. And then for a Friday night, we wanted to do Shabbat. And one of the Jewish communities, we talked to them and they said, you can come on a Friday night. We just did the Friday prayer. The Muslims and Jews went to the mosque together. It was really beautiful. And last minute, the rabbi freaked out, or the president of the synagogue. And he said, well, the Jews can come, but maybe the Muslims don't. And we're like, well, we either come all together or don't. And then after going back and forth, he said, okay, the Jews and the Muslims can come, but no Palestinians, because those scare me. And the Jews in the group said, this is an organization, by the way, called Sisters of Salam Shalom. They said, sorry, if our Palestinian brother cannot be with us, that's not the synagogue we want to do Sabbath in. And so we will have our own Shabbat service at the hotel and not go. And it was one of the most moving things for me to see what the future can look like. And I literally cried the whole evening as we did the prayers together, did the Shabbat together, and said, we are equal and we will work together as equal. That's how we model the future. And nothing scares those who believe in war, those who believe in killing, those who believe bombs is the solution, than the sight of us together. And they will do everything possible to stop it. Everything possible. The only people today in the region who have vision, I think it was mentioned earlier by the professor, are those who are radical, those who want to kill. You know, we're hearing about settlements in Gaza, we're hearing about starvation, we're hearing about eternal war, we're hearing about religious war. Those are the people who have vision. And we need to provide what the alternative vision is.
And the vision, of course, is peace. So we already saw the seeds of hope and the seeds of the future. I want to say a few more words about forgiveness. Because forgiveness, I think, what I learned in the last year is the most powerful tool and powerful energy. And I learned it from our communal friend, Hamza Awaude. He said in an interview, it was in November, that Hamza is a Palestinian. His family was displaced in 48, the independence of Israel, the Nakba, to the refugees camp in Hebron. And all his life he lived under Israeli occupation. And he said, I'm willing to forgive about the past. I'm willing to forgive about the present. But I want and cannot forgive about the future. It was so profound, I watched it again. I think the only interview ever in my life that I watched twice. And then I start thinking, if I want to be a great person like Hamza, whom should I forgive? So I've decided to forgive. I've decided to forgive those who killed my parents, the Hamas. In my narrative, and it's my own personal narrative, you don't need to agree. In my narrative, Hamas is a terrorist organization that is killing and oppressing his own people and innocent people in general. If they are Jewish Israelis, even better. And on October 7th, Hamas acted upon his nature. I've decided to forgive them. But I was angry. I wanted to punish. I want them to pay the price. I want them to be accountable, and I wanted to revenge in the Israeli government. The Israeli government promised my parents that live only 200 meters from the border in Gaza. The wall was literally shadowing their house. They promised my parents again and again, and again and again, security and safety. And they totally failed. So I was seeking revenge. I wanted to punish them. But those feelings destroyed me from the inside. I stopped functioning as a father. I stopped functioning as a husband. My wife will say even now that I'm not functioning as a husband. So I hope she's not listening. As a friend, I was just focusing how to make them pay. But after listening to Hamze, I have decided I choose to forgive the Israeli government. I don't care about them anymore. I care only about the future. And when I'm speaking with Israeli public, and I do that a lot in Israel, they cannot understand, everyone, the Jewish Israelis can understand I am willing to forgive Hamas, but they cannot understand I am willing to forgive the Israeli government. And I'll tell them, if you keep invest and resource yourself to protest against the government, no one will ever offer and create a better future, a better vision. So this is our role, to make this vision, to dream and to envision this much, much, much better and well-deserved future.
I'll say one sentence and then time for the bottle, maybe.
How are we going to make
You
this?
might be listening to this and think, Aziz, Maoz, this is crazy. Aren't you angry? Are you telling us you can overcome this anger? And no, I am angry. We started our conversation today of saying his family was traumatized today, Maoz's family. We started with talking about how my brother was killed and many people in my family were, and how Maoz's parents were killed. So to say we're not angry is lying to you. And I won't do that. We are angry. The question isn't, are you angry or not? I want you actually to be angry. The question is, what do you do with that anger? Anger is like a nuclear power. You can use it to create light, or you can use it to create bombs. What do we do with our anger? And what we decided to do with our anger is to provide the alternative, to show what's possible, instead of using it to spread more hate.
Yes, so what's in this bottle? This is sesame oil. Sesame oil that was cultivated in Israel. And humanity was able to achieve peace so many times in the past, but never was able to achieve a sesame that will be harvested by a combine, by a machinery, and that will produce high production of sesame per acre. But dream we achieved so many times. The US achieved peace and reconciliation with Germany, with Japan, with Italy. They are now part of the G7 group. You made peace with your greatest enemy ever. So peace is easy. But sesame that will be harvested by a machinery was never achieved. So my father partner went to Ethiopia back in 2008 to learn about the sesame agriculture in Ethiopia. And in Ethiopia, they are cultivating millions of hectares of sesame. All is harvested by hand, like this. Millions of dunam, millions. And the production is less than, kilo, dunam, pound. It's too complicated. This I will never achieve. So I'll do it in kilos and dunam and Southern, you'll tell me, okay? Less than 30 kilo per dunam. Southern, do the math. It's really low production. So they start daydreaming. This is the first step in achieving peace, dreaming about a sesame that will be harvested by a combine and will produce high production per dunam, per acre. The second step is they decided what will be the values of this sesame. High production, resilience for climate change, will be able to cultivate in Israel, harvested by combine. So the values of the future, like Aziz started sharing with you, shared acknowledgement and recognition, reconciliation and healing, through healing, equality and dignity, security and safety. Again, security and safety to both people, because there will be no security and safety to one without the other. And the third step, they build a coalition of research. Okay, yeah, it's nice. A coalition of research centers, universities, farmers, students, very powerful coalition. And this is exactly Elia and Jad and Sausan and Zinab. This is what we are doing here. We are building a coalition, a very powerful coalition. And the fourth step was for the Sesame to write a blueprint, a roadmap, how to make this dream into a reality. So the very, very detailed roadmap, and they had a deadline to be accomplished by 2025. And this is exactly what we are doing. Aziz and I, before coming to the state this time, we had a 3-day strategy meeting in Switzerland, exactly to write this roadmap. How are we going to make, what are the milestones to achieve peace by 2030? This is our mission. This is the mission. We are not shy about our mission. So they've done the same, and the fifth step is to execute. With no execution, it can be an amazing file on our Google or whatever drive you use. So they start executing, and this is what we are now executing. We are not wasting time. This is execution. So they were a year and a half ahead of time. And I want to read you from the label. The Yacobi sesame, Yacobi is my father. The Yacobi sesame variety was cultivated at the Hebrew University Faculty of Agriculture as a premium high-quality oil variety suited for the Israeli farming. The variety is dedicated to the memory of our friend Yacobi, an agronomist, agriculture advisor, worker, and lover of the land. And again, another thing that we have in common, the Palestinian and Jews, the love for the land. Known for his vast knowledge, integrity, and modesty. This is, again, Aziz, maybe you share them, what's the action, what is the plan, and how they can be part of this plan.
You want to start and I'll finish?
I'll let you.
Not to interrupt, but you have 7 minutes.
Okay, well, go. Yeah,
70 minutes?
7. If you want to make it that, we can. But
All right, so there are a few things that's really important to make that plan happen. And the first thing when people ask, what can we do? We say the first thing you can do is amplify our voices. Voices like ours, like Jad, like Elijah, are not shared, are not amplified. You watch the news every day, and before I came today, I was doing a training on Islamophobia and anti-Muslim, anti-Palestinian bias. And I was talking to a group and explaining to them how difficult it is to change the stereotypical image, especially of a Palestinian and American news, where the stereotypical image, we're going to find the angriest guy possible, the hairiest guy possible, and put them on television and make them yell. This is often the stereotype. And so we need you to amplify my voice, Maoz's voice, the voices you've heard earlier, because without that amplification, we don't change the discourse. And without changing the discourse, nothing will change. So first is doing that, amplifying the voices. The second thing you got to do is to legitimize the new leaders for the future. That's the new leaders. We are the new leaders. When people keep saying that, well, there are terrible leaders today, so we have to wait. Wait until when? How many more generations are we going to sacrifice? What does wait mean? Anyone who tells you we're going to wait for the next generation, do you really think children in Gaza who are orphaned today going to be more pro-peace than us? Do you think the generation growing up in the West Bank and Israel and Lebanon going to be more pro-peace if this reality continue? That is nonsense. That's a cop-out, and that's saying, dooming the next generation to the same and maybe much worse fate than the one we have. So we don't wait for another generation. We take on leadership. And that's why we are here, to show that we are taking leadership. We're doing these meetings in Palestine. We're doing them in Israel. We're doing them in Europe. We're meeting with Congress. We're meeting with the Pope. We're meeting with anyone who's willing, and even many people who are not willing to listen to us, because that's how you create leadership. So we need everyone to help us be the legitimate leaders. The third thing is we got to change policies. The current policies, whether in the US or whether in Europe, are terrible. There's no, I don't think anyone disagrees on that. The investment in peace versus the investment in war it's a joke. I can tell you tens of billions of weapons. Do you want to guess how much money has gone to peace building in the last year from the US government? They had no problem sending tens of billions of dollars for weapons. But how much did they send for peace? Like nothing in comparison, nothing. And then they get on television and say, we're wondering why peace isn't happening. It's normal. You talked about agriculture, Maoz. It's normal in agriculture. In any business, we both are entrepreneurs. Wherever you invest, you get a reward. You invest in war, you get war. You invest in peace, you get peace. And that's what we all need to start being loud. We need that foreign policy of the West to change.
So we are ahead of time.
No, I have something to say for you. I can keep talking.
No,
I wanted to actually end my part with two kind of poem stories.
Okay.
One is by Samih al-Qasim, a Palestinian poet. And Samih al-Qasim has, we all have different moments in our lives too. Like I said, we are angry, but we're trying to use our anger different way. But he had this poem that has always moved me growing up with losing my brother. And he says, the day I'm killed, my killer will rifle through my pockets and he will find 3 traveling tickets. 1 to peace, 1 to the rain and the fields, and 1 to the conscience of a humankind. So I beg you, my killer, I beg you, do not waste such a thing. Do not waste these tickets. Take them and go traveling. And then the other story I wanted to share comes from an Israeli author, Maoz Inon, and he says, if you're walking by and you see a building on fire, what are your options? Let's think about it together. What are your options? First one, what most people will do, run away, right? It's building on fire here. I don't want to get involved. I get in to help people inside. I know I might get caught by that fire. Now here's the thing. If you know how fire works, if you don't put out the fire, it will end up in that building eventually, and it'll end up in the other building. And that's what's happening with Israel and Palestine. Started 100 years ago, but even in the most recent stuff, Gaza, then the West Bank, then Lebanon, then Yemen, then Iran, eventually God knows how far this could go. So you can't say it's too far, I don't need to care, it's 5,000 miles away. You should care. The second option, he said, is you create a committee to investigate who should you blame for the fire. And by the time you decide who to blame, everyone in that building will be dead. Okay, we can argue, and it's fine. There are times for argument, but if that's all we do without helping people who need help, then really, are we serious? People who think if I made a tweet, then I've done my activism, or X, whatever it's called now, that's not activism alone.
No, from here.
No, X is not. Elon is here. We're not talking about Elon.
No, but you don't want to?
About Elon, I'll talk to him, but I'm not talking about him right now. There's a third option, and the third option is what any of us would think is normal. You get a bucket, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. But some of you might say, well, we're standing here, there is no bucket. Then you get a cup, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. And then some of you will say, there is no cup. You get a spoon, you fill it with water, and you throw it in the fire. Now tell me, would one person with a spoon be able to put out a fire? No. But that's the thing. If each one of us does what is it we can do, that's how you put out the fire. Some of us can amplify voices. Some of us, we said we met the Pope and had asked him, and he became our ambassador to the G7 meeting. It started because a journalist said, oh, I want to help you. I have a connection with the Vatican. I'll get you maybe into this. Every one of us has an ability to do something. It could be a spoon, it could be a cup, it could be a bucket, or as a friend of ours, an illustrator, just painted our story, and she said, if you don't have any of those, then it's with our tears that we will put out the fire.
And so I shared with you about my father, the best farmer in Israel. Okay, that's a fact. Share that. Okay. I want to share you also about my mom. My mom was an artist, And in the last 15 years, she was painting mandalas. And she painted thousands of mandalas, and she gave many to my sisters, to my brother, everyone who come to visit her, she would give him mandala. I got only one. And on the mandala she gave me, she painted, all our dreams can be fulfilled if we have the courage to chase them. So that's how my parents prepared me for October 7th. My father taught me that the future will be better if I will make it that way. And my mom gave me the ability to dream and the courage to chase and follow my dreams. So again, I'm encouraging you, all of us, to not to be shy of dreaming and to be courageous and brave enough to chase our dreams. And I made many postcards for you. So everyone who wants a postcard, there is plenty here. And on the back side, I wrote a phrase and words of peace. One from Aziz Abu Sarah that you all know now. If you must divide us, people should divide us as those of us who believe in justice, peace, and equality, and those who don't yet, like he just shared. And we don't have Pope Francis here, but what Pope Francis told us, let us not sow death, destruction, or fear, let us sow hope. So let us sow hope. It's as simple as that. Thank you very much. Before we finish, Jad and Elia, come here for a second. I brought you something, just a second.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Oh, what is it? Excellent job.
Where is it? Where is it? Just
Excellent
a
job.
second. So I brought each one of you.
Oh my
yes.
goodness. Oh my special sesame oil.
Yes.
Thank you so my goodness.
And I will be honored to have a photo with you.
Yes, please.
Thank you. Peace is possible. Shalom, salam, peace. Let's chant it together. Shalom, salam, peace. Shalom, salam, peace.